Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Journey to Well, the podcast. This is going to be a deep conversation. This is something that I was telling Gabby I've been wanting to talk about for probably 3 years now, about 2.5 years. And before the podcast was even born, like I didn't even know that we would be here today. But I believe that we do not talk about grief and grief in other contexts besides death and grieving someone that has physically died. So that's what we're going to be walking through today. So let me introduce Gabby. Gabby is one of those people that you just meet on social media, and we have just clicked. We have a lot of alignment, I think, in our business and our knowledge seeking and the way that we move through the world. So I'm super excited to have you, Gabby. One of my favorite things to do is have my guests introduce themselves, because I think that it gives us a little insight on, like, how do you want to introduce yourself? What do you want to share with the world? So please introduce yourself. Who is Gabby? And then we'll dive into the conversation.
I love that you have me introduce myself. That's just such a cool thing that I didn't even think of for my podcast. I want to say thanks for having me and thanks for opening the door to this conversation that needs to be had. So I am a lot of things. I'm a yoga instructor, Reiki practitioner, life coach. I have a podcast because I could chit chat for days. I love talking. And most of all, I just love connecting with people in every aspect. I think we all can find some way to relate to each other. And at the end of the day, we are all one. And it's fun to find a piece of me in someone else. So, yeah, I have a bunch of other things that wrap up that create Gab, but that's kind of the brief version.
I love that. And it's so funny. We'll talk about human design at the end because that's what we do. But to introduce that part of you, one little snippet of you, Gabby is a manifesting generator, emotional authority, and she's a 4-1 profile, which that's what I was saying is so interesting. I don't think I've ever met a 4-1 before. So we're going to talk about that. But manifesting generators, we typically like to have our hands in a lot of different pots. So it totally makes sense, like yoga, Reiki, life coach. Obviously, I'm a manifesting generator too, and I have so many different hats that I wear too. So
Yeah.
I love this conversation.
I love it. I always say I'm versatile. Like someone
Yes.
asks about me, even in like style. Like my style is gonna be
Mhm.
here one day, here another day. I feel like I have so many different people living within me, and they all
Mm.
like to come out in different situations. And I love that about myself. I don't feel in a box. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
I'm boxless.
Yeah, and don't put yourself in the box. Like, allow
Yeah,
these different versions of you to come out because they all deserve to be heard.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So you posted a reel. This is the spark of behind the scenes. The spark of this podcast episode is you posted a reel and you said something like, we need to talk about grief more often. And it's okay to feel grief and to process grief. And there's so many different avenues of grief. And I would love to get into your details, but in the reel you shared, um, processing and moving through different versions of yourself and even doing like inner
Yeah.
child work. So we're going to get into all of that. Um, One thing that I want to share is my seat of grief, my experience of grief. Different flavors. Of course, we all experience a lot of different pieces of grief. I would say one of the biggest light bulb moments happened about 2.5, 3 years ago. In my life, I chose to walk away from a 7-year long relationship engagement, and we dated all through my 20s. And so there was, I mean, anytime that you date someone, anytime you're in a relationship, even if it's a friendship with someone for long periods of time, there's this trajectory that you believe that your life is on. And to
Yeah.
choose to, whether it happens to you or you choose to walk away or step away, you're changing that whole life trajectory. And so I remember when I was processing this situation, there was so much grief there, and I had a conversation with one of my friends who is also leaving a long-term relationship, and she was like, "We don't talk about this. I've never heard anyone have a conversation about grieving someone or something that is still living, like this person is
Mhm.
still alive." And I have been blessed, I suppose. I haven't had any super close family members die or anyone super close to me. I've had extended family and like grandparents pass away, which does have its own grief process, but I haven't experienced and walked through that, the death of and grieving process of a death. So I can only speak to the living death and the grief
Mhm.
process there. So that's the flavor. That's where I'm really coming from my experience that I want to walk into this conversation with. I'm curious if you are comfortable sharing a little bit of your journey with grief. What have you walked through? And feel
Yeah.
free to dive. You don't have to give us the whole list, but wherever you
Yeah,
wanna
yeah.
share is totally fine.
Oh, I'm thinking like, where do I start? One thing that I wanna say based off of what you were talking about was there's grieving people that are still here, still living, and then there's grieving situations as well that we
Mm,
also don't really talk about, like
mhm,
grieving the life that we thought we were gonna have,
yeah,
grieving the experiences we thought we were gonna have, and then grieving the experiences we did have in a
yeah,
certain place or with certain people over the past, oh man, I moved to Italy in September. So I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved to Florida. That was like a grieving process, of course, like tying up ends, trying to understand that transformation. And I created basically a new identity of myself is what I felt like. I remember
mhm,
going to Florida thinking I'm gonna walk. I was also I was like 17.
mm,
I was like, I'm gonna walk different. I'm gonna walk with
mhm,
confidence. I'm gonna show up in these different ways. So that's just like a snippet. And then yeah, in September I moved from Florida to Italy. So I had the past year just the one word I would describe it to be is transformational. Like
mhm,
it was transitions, it was a lot of adapting, it was growing, it was shedding, so much
mhm,
shedding. So I think the one, I guess, the one that hits closest to home is the identity of myself and the different
mhm,
versions of me that I've gone through this past year because it has just been full of movement. And I had one experience where, you know, when you're doing a lot of movement and travel and your cup is just like up to here, like you were just filled with chaos. You were not
mm.
grounded at all.
Yeah.
And I was, like, doing things to ground myself, but I wasn't feeling grounded. Like,
Mhm,
there's checking off the box of earthing, breathing, but there's another part of grounding that is the feeling of it.
mm,
And I was just up to here with emotions and felt myself boiling over, and
mhm,
I felt like during that time period, I was filling myself with reading a lot or watching TV a lot or social media, throwing myself into work. And I remember one night I went in my bedroom and I listened to some music. I listened to Beautiful Chorus. They
mm,
are amazing. If you need to get in your feelings,
yeah,
they will bring them out. So I was laying in the bed and just had this almost like I don't want to say euphoric, but that's kind of what it felt like this
mm,
cry that was so spiritually charged and that kind
mhm,
of like
ugh,
took over me and I was just laying there and my eyes were closed, but I was seeing almost like my life over the past year and saying goodbye almost, but in a way where it was like I was back in those places. I was back in Florida. I was back even in New Jersey. And then, of course, you're laying there and you have more memories come up, even from
mhm,
your childhood and things that you realize I never grieved any of those things. So now I'm laying in the bed, I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm almost like watching my life on a movie screen in
mhm,
my mind. And I just felt the emotion in the most
mhm,
raw way. There was no distracting anymore. There was no hiding. It was
yeah,
just these parts of you are not with you right now. They're always with you somewhere, but they're not coming with you anymore, and that's
Mm,
okay. I always
mm,
wanted to try to stuff my baggage with as much as I can, as many different pieces of me as I can,
mm,
but then there comes a time where you have to let go of the pieces that you know, "This doesn't fit where you are. This doesn't fit who you are." You don't need
mm,
to, force an alignment that isn't there. So in
mm,
a very long story, that's
mm,
kind of been my experience the past year of grieving, just flowing
mm.
through the different phases of me with acceptance and relearning who I am.
Yeah, there's so much there, and I wanna start with, I mean, we're really talking about the same thing, whether it's grieving places and situations, like, or me walking away from a relationship. What I was grieving is exactly the same. I was grieving this version of myself that I thought that I was going to be, and that I thought, like, your identity gets wrapped up in situations, in relationships, in people. And so you coming from Jersey, right? Like, or being born in Jersey, like, that's part of my identity. I was born in New
Mhm,
Hampshire, so I have that version of myself. You are part New Jersian, if that's a word.
mhm.
New Jerseyan. And then you're
It should be a word.
and then you're part Floridian, and then all of these identities that we wrap ourselves up in location where we're living, or in relationship that we're with someone. And so that was probably one of the, like, almost freakiest things for me to walk through, is you come to this moment in big pain points, in dark nights of the soul, and in darkness, whatever you want to call it. You come to this breaking point, and when you're cracked open, then you're forced to ask yourself the question, who am I? And what
Mhm,
pieces of me do I want to carry? And what pieces of me do I want to let go? And then letting go of those pieces of yourself. And it's not like a, because I'm still the same person, right? Like, it's not like I'm
right.
a vastly different person, or you wouldn't
Yeah.
recognize me. I look the same. You can go back and watch my YouTube videos. Like, I'm still talking about the
Mhm.
same things 2.5 years ago.
Yeah,
I still look pretty much the same, I think. Nothing
yeah,
drastic has changed. I've moved states, but, like, it's a soul, it's an energy situation, and it's
yeah.
letting go of these micro pieces of you, and then asking yourself, what do I want to, what really is me now? Because we're constantly
Mhm.
changing, like, even on a cellular level. What is it, every
Yeah.
7 years, I think we're, like,
Yeah.
completely regenerated, like, we're completely
Yeah,
new
yeah,
people. And
yeah.
so that is part of the grieving process too. So it doesn't even have
Mhm.
to be this big situation where we've chose to walk away from a relationship, or move, or start a new job. Like, we're always changing, and we're always grieving these, I believe that we're always, maybe not grieving, not always grieving, but always processing these
Right.
versions of ourselves and these new parts of ourselves. Um, and there's so much, for me, there is so much fear, and there's so much resistance there. So
Mhm.
I'm curious if you can dive into that a little bit more. Like, you were kind of sharing some coping mechanisms, like throwing yourself
Mhm.
into work, or reading a lot, or watching TV a lot. And all of that
Yeah.
is very normal. We all do that,
Mhm.
whether we want to admit it or not. I
Mhm.
have my own coping mechanism bag that I pull out when it's too much for me to handle. But I'm
Yeah.
curious if you can dive into your thought processing in the resistance, and what you know of,
Mhm.
like, how we come up to that barrier of grief, resisting grief, pain,
Yes.
fear, anger, frustration, the dense
Yeah.
emotions.
Yeah. I'm someone who has definitely played with resistance for a long time and a lot of different ways. I think naturally, or maybe not naturally, but through childhood, I became rebellious. Not
Mm,
rebellious, and I'm
okay.
gonna go spray paint something, but you wanna tell me what to do? Okay, I'm gonna go do the opposite,
Yep,
which
yep.
is toxic trait, but that's just me being open about it. That's just something that I've always felt inside. So when I've had those feelings of I should be changing, the same rebellion is gonna come out because
Okay.
it's this force upon me that you should be doing that. And I'm like, "Oh no, mm-mm, that's not how it's gonna work here.
Yeah.
I'm in charge. I'm in control." So I've definitely played with the resistance. And I think especially for me in regards to changing how I show up in relationships, because my upbringing was very little like uncertain, a
Okay.
lot of uncertainty. So then I bring that into relationships, showing
Mhm.
up uncertain and maybe codependent tendencies in the
Yeah.
past and feeling comfortable in uncertainty. So when I realized, okay, you're 25, you need to change. And
Mhm.
when I got out of my last relationship, I was probably like 22 or 23. And it
Mhm.
really hit me like, I don't want to be like that anymore. I don't want to show up in a relationship that way. And there was a lot of grief around that whole situation, grieving a person, grieving who I was, grieving my behaviors, even if they weren't right, just grieving like that was my adaptive child trying to help me and show up. And now I have to let them go.
Mm.
Um, but what I've found over the last few years, specifically in regards to relationships, is it's like you said, the energetic change has to happen. I can't force it upon myself. And a lot
Mm.
of times when we do see something that we think is wrong with us or that we want to fix or change, we flow into that unhealthy state of force. We're trying to force a change. We're trying to heal now. We're trying to get over it. I had a previous conversation today where we were talking about how so many people, we just want the pill that we could take that's going to
Yeah.
help the behaviors get out of the way, or
Yeah.
take the pill to make the pain stop.
Yeah.
But it's us that we need to change, and we can't just like take the pill and move on. And I think it has to happen more naturally and slower than we
Yeah.
actually want it to be. So what I would say to people is you're going to feel the want within yourself to change. You're not going to
Mhm.
feel this force of I have to do this out of desperation, out of frustration with yourself, and out of
Yeah.
anger, 'cause I definitely moved like that for a while where I'm just fed up with myself. I'm fed up with my behavioral patterns, and I'm moving with no compassion, no grace for
Yeah.
myself. I'm like, "Here we go again. You messed up again. You did this again." And that didn't get me anywhere. It didn't
Mhm.
help at all. But when I started to accept the slow pace of healing and
Mhm.
enter it with compassion and curiosity, when I
Mm.
started asking questions about it, and trying to understand it from this third party perspective, it was
Mm.
a lot easier. And this is somewhat off topic, but it comes around. So in the inner child world, I always recommend using a picture of
Mhm.
yourself as your child and just kind of working with them, because it's easier to sometimes put in work and love and effort into something that isn't you. And when we
Mhm.
have this picture, it's almost like a separation that then, of course, throughout time, we end up wrapping it all together.
Mhm.
But that's kind of how I try to view grief and healing from that perspective of like using that version of me. Like I'm watching me grieve from this
Mm.
external perspective. And no, I don't have a picture of me right now that I'm particularly looking at that's helping me go
Mhm.
through the process, but I'm using that same framework
Hmm.
to just look from an outside perspective and say, would I be mean to myself? Would I be hard on myself? Would I give myself such a small leash if I was somebody else? No,
Mm. Yeah.
no. So I kind of use that picture reference as a guideline to help heal now.
I
Yeah.
love that. You're reminding me, for anyone that has read The Untethered Soul, if you haven't, read it. Have you read it? Have you heard
I
of it?
haven't. I've had so many
Okay.
people tell me to, but I haven't.
Read it. So one of the most powerful parts of this book is um and also if you're familiar with IFS, if you're interested in internal family systems, like it's the same idea that we have our self, capital S self, and then we have all of these other parts of us. So in the Untethered Soul, how he explained it is that it's almost like you have, or if you want to look at what's that movie? What's that movie with all the little parts where they have anxiety and fear?
Oh, it's like a cartoon, and
Yeah, yeah.
they're all different colors.
Shoot. Whatever. You
I
all
can't
know what we're
remember.
talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
um, it's that movie. It will come to me. So you have your yourself, and then you have all of these other parts in front of you. So if you're watching the YouTube
Mhm.
video, you see my hand movements, but imagine your capital S self is sitting in the background, like way behind your body, and then all of these other parts of you that you are feeling like, geez, I need to change this part, I need to do better here, I need, like, and everything that you were just saying, they're in front. And so if you're able to take that back seat, like you're saying, almost coming out of your body, coming out of yourself, like staring at that little girl or that little boy,
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're separating all of these parts from yourself, your higher self is how I would word it, or
Yeah.
capital S self. And when you're able to approach situations, especially when we're talking dense emotions like frustration, grief, pain, anger, sadness, grief I would say is the densest emotion, in my opinion. But you're able to approach these emotions and these parts of you with more compassion, like you said, with
Mhm.
more love, because there's that separation where you're like, oh, okay, I'm not the grief, I'm not the frustration,
Yeah.
this isn't me fully, this isn't fully me. And can I allow myself, asking questions curiously, like you said, can I allow myself to feel this and let it just move through me, knowing that it's not like my core identity? And there's so much permission there, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah. Something I wanted to add when you were talking was there's sometimes what I see with a lot of clients that come, they feel like almost as if what they want to grieve is not valid enough to
Yes.
be in the box of grieving, which I'm like,
Mm.
who made these rules though? It's because we only talk about grief if it's around someone who has passed. So people
Yeah.
don't think it's valid to be grieving someone who's still here or a situation or your favorite coffee shop that closed down. Maybe not
Yep.
like that, but you get what I'm saying. Like we
Sure.
don't need to we don't need to make it a big thing the same way that like big T trauma and little T trauma
That's
came
what I was
about,
gonna say.
Yeah, there's like big G grief and then
Mhm.
there's little G grief, and both
Mm.
are okay to be, a part of the grieving process. We need to stop undermining our feelings and start validating them. So we're not getting
Yeah.
anywhere by saying you're not allowed to feel that way. You're
Mhm.
not supposed to feel that way. Where are we getting with that? We're
Right.
just knocking us down even more.
Right. There was a long, not a significantly long period of time, but there was a lot of shame
Mm,
around, I shouldn't be grieving this relationship because I chose to walk away. It was my choice. It wasn't something that happened to me. And once I realized that my feelings were still valid and I was allowed to grieve and I was allowed to feel the disappointment, even though it was my choice, there was so
mhm,
much freedom and processing there. And thank you for bringing up the trauma, the big T, little T. That's a big part of my story too, is I'm someone that has experienced a lot of what I would call, or how I perceive other people would perceive, little T trauma. I haven't experienced a ton. I've experienced some of the big T trauma, but a lot more little T trauma. And I love
Yeah.
that you're like, there's little G grief and big G grief.
Yeah.
But the most important thing to remember is it's still just as valid. Your
Yeah.
feelings and your experience and what you are moving through is not any less valid than if you were to experience the loss of someone dying physically in this world. Like the loss of a relationship, the this end of a job is just as traumatic, we can even say, as someone dying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about that with all emotions as you were speaking.
Mm.
Like, a lot of times we say, "Are you really angry about that?" Well, no, I'm not angry enough to go punch a hole through the wall, but I'm still angry about it. I'm still
Yeah.
feeling that emotion. I think a
Mm.
lot of times we see an emotion. I'm such a visual person, so I'm picturing like
Mm.
anger, and then it's just that's it, anger. But there's anger, and there's all these different little webs that come with it. Like there's
Yeah.
emotions are so complex, and there's so many layers to each of them
Yeah.
that I think we curiosity is the only place to start. Like, what
Mm.
level of anger am I feeling?
Mm.
Where in my body am I feeling anger or
Mm.
grief or even happiness? Like, where am I feeling it? How is it coming up? How am I reacting now that I'm experiencing these feelings?
Mm.
Once we just start asking ourselves questions, it's a lot less scary.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, it's safe. Okay, we're safe with ourselves. We're safe to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And yeah. Again, like this goes back to the very beginning of our conversation. I'm not a box girl. Like I can't put
Yep.
anything in a box. I'm
Yeah.
also a Libra, so I like to I see yeah, I see everything from every single perspective
Mhm.
all the time. And
Mhm.
to my, could be good, could be bad. But that
To your
definitely
detriment
plays
sometimes.
into it definitely plays into like why I want everything to just be able to exist in its own way instead of like
Yeah.
society's projection as to how we think it should be.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I had, my memory came back. The movie is Inside Out for those of you that are listening
Mm.
that need to watch it, so I'm just gonna throw that out. But yes, with all emotions, you're completely correct, and I would add allowing the emotion to just play out, like that story that you shared where you just allowed yourself to cry.
Mhm.
My personal experience in the resistance is that I find myself feeling so much resistance, like, before we started before we hit record, I talked to Gabby and I was just like, "Listen," and then I just started crying and I'm like, I've had I'm recording this like noontime my time, and this entire morning I've had this heaviness on me and I don't know what it was. I still don't really fully know what it was, but it was something around this conversation of grief, and it's just such a heavy topic to me. And I was like, I just need to cry it out for 5 minutes and then we can record. And if I cry again, it's fine. But like, I think I just need to let it move through me. And there's oftentimes there's so much resistance to allowing because we get stuck in the story. We have to
Yeah.
justify our emotions and then we have to
Mm.
label them. And then we have to like make sure, like you were saying, that like my grief is worthy enough to be felt, or
Right.
my frustration is worthy enough to be felt. And if you feel frustrated in the moment, I love that. I mean, yes, for sure. This is what I work on with my clients. Like, where do you feel that frustration in your body? And there's so much somatic work that we can do surrounding that. But also, there's so much freedom in just naming it. Like, I feel frustrated. I don't have to go into the whole story. I don't have to justify it for
Yes.
myself or for you, whoever I'm talking to. And then just allowing yourself, like, how can I allow this frustration to move through me? How can I allow this grief to move through me? For me, grief is processed a lot through tears. But
Mhm.
there's other ways that maybe grief shows up in your body, in your mind, in your soul. And there's no right or wrong. Let's take the box and
Yeah.
throw the box out once again.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to express it, but when we allow ourselves to express it, oftentimes for me, it's like less than an hour. Like
Yeah.
sometimes, and I spend an entire fucking day fighting tears or fighting like my in this
Mhm.
case I spent the entire morning. I didn't cry this
Right.
morning. You think I let myself, I'm like, this is such an odd situation, like whatever's
Yeah.
okay. Until I was in the presence of you, and then I'm like, okay, I just need to let it out real quick and then we'll be good. But like it was 5 seconds, and then
Yeah.
now I
Mhm.
genuinely don't feel like I'm holding back tears, that heaviness, that weight that was on my chest and just in my soul is not there anymore. And I think that that's something that's worth being shared, is like, how can I
Yeah.
allow myself to feel this in this moment, whether it's with a safe person or allowing yourself to feel it just alone.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. When we talk about resistance, I think about in any situation where we are resisting something, it's going to grow bigger.
Yep.
So I thought of this question when you were talking of if someone is feeling that restriction against feeling feelings or going through grief or they're not validating their feelings, just ask yourself the question of what happens if I just let it happen? What
Mm,
happens if
yeah.
I let the feeling be felt? What am I
Mm,
scared of? Because there's
mm,
so much fear around that. And
mm,
my mind goes to eating. But when you restrict eating, you are
mm,
going to crave those things 10 times more. And with my emotions, if I'm trying to bottle something up, and I'm
mm,
sure a lot of people can agree, when I'm bottling something up, I feel it 10 times more because
mm,
it's trapped. There's nowhere to go. But if you turn the
mm,
key to that place in your body that you're feeling it boil up, you turn the key, you open the door and you let it flow, how much
mm,
lighter do you feel? So I think
mhm,
the question is, why am I resisting something that I
mm.
know is going to help me feel better?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be out of judgment. The question
No.
is out of pure curiosity of,
Yeah.
oh, because maybe there is a fear behind it. I've
Mhm.
had fear going back to the relationship topic of if I change these behaviors, then I might be in a stable, safe relationship. And that
Oh
is
god.
scary.
That's
And
a
that can
deep
be
combo.
scary. Yeah, yeah. And that could be scary for someone who grew up in a more turbulent household.
Yeah.
So when I ask myself, like, why are you just not changing? Like, what is holding you back? What are you
Mm.
scared of? Because I had so much resistance there. And it was like, huh, I'm scared of safety in that type of relationship. And then I'm like, oh, now I feel so much better. Now I want to change because I deserve safety. And that kind of like,
Wow.
huh, open up the doors. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm
Ugh.
just thinking about the feeling of resistance and how when we
Yeah.
decide to just let it flow, whatever feeling we're
Mhm.
resisting it, it just is so much lighter in the body.
Mhm. And I love, yes, it's gently, with compassion, with grace, and with love, asking these questions like, why is this resistance showing up? Where is it showing up in my body? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What
Mm,
sensations am I noticing around this? And then, especially, I mean, this is a whole different conversation that I feel like we can't get into today because we would just
mhm.
go on for another hour. But
Yeah.
it does come down to safety. And when you're talking
Mhm.
about your relationship, I had the same moments. I still am, let's be honest. Um, why am I feeling the resistance, or yeah, like why am I wanting to change? Because beneath that, the why that you arrive to is because like I want safety. And
Mhm.
anyone that's listening to this, like however you're relating it to your life and your mind, please know that it's okay if you don't feel safe enough yet. And just you
Yeah.
listening to this conversation and just you having these conversations with yourself does not mean that everything changes, and does not mean that you automatically, like a flip of the
Mhm.
switch, you feel safe. Because whenever we're talking about these really deep situations like grief, like safety, this is a nervous system situation, and it takes, like we were talking about, it's slow, like the pill thing, like just taking a you
Mhm.
can't take a pill, you can't flip the switch and then you're like, oh, okay, now I'm ready for this loving, perfect, fabulous relationship because I feel
Yeah.
safe within myself. Like, this is truly a journey. And the first step, one of the first steps, is is curiously asking yourself these questions and recognizing that I don't feel safe right now.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay to not feel safe. You don't have to. I mean, we want to all feel safe eventually, but it's okay if you're not there right now.
Yeah. I love that
Yeah.
so much. You have such a
Yeah.
safe, like, safe energy, safe and
Uh,
comforting. I watch your videos and I'm like, "Oh, it's like a blanket." But
Thank
yeah, we could go
you.
on the safety conversation and be here
Yeah.
all day.
Oh my gosh, all day.
I thought of something else really quick about
Sure.
going through grief, and this was more towards when I was grieving my past relationship and going
Mhm.
through the crazy heartbreak that I did.
Mhm.
And you mentioned it before of visualizing your feelings, like what does it look like?
Mm.
And something I did, one thing I did that really helped was like an anger journal and allowing the anger to be there and just writing it all out and riff it
Wow.
up, tear it out. And that felt really good. But the second thing I did was kind of like draw the feelings. And they
Hmm.
weren't like, artistic drawings. They were just anger right now feels like a lot of times it wasn't like a red evil thing. When I started
Mhm.
to draw anger, it started to feel like a blue or like a purple, like a sad
Mhm.
feeling. And
Hmm.
it helped me get to the root of my true feelings, not just like,
Mm.
oh, I'm feeling pissed off because he said this and then he did this. It
Yeah.
was underneath this anger that I'm drawing in my notebook and that I'm picturing in my mind. It's just sad. It
Yeah.
helped me get to like the root of all of my feelings because there's
Wow.
so many secondary feelings that we have. Like first we feel this, and then
Mhm.
we have either the mask or we have the feeling that comes after that just kind of takes over, which is
Mhm.
typically anger,
Mhm.
right? We feel hurt. You
Mhm.
hurt me, so now I'm angry, or I'm feeling
Mhm.
sad, and now I'm angry because I'm sad, or I
Yeah.
don't feel safe, and now I have to be angry because anger is tough and
Yeah.
not being safe, that's scary,
Yeah.
so I think just breaking it down until you get to your actual feelings is so helpful, and it was sparked by your comment of just seeing your feelings.
Yeah.
Give them a character, and
Mhm.
something I did was make friends with a lot of them, like anger.
Yeah.
This may sound like super crazy, but I would kind of like have a conversation with these characters in my mind
Yeah.
and just be like, hey, like you are no longer welcome here. Like you were here for
Mhm.
now and that was okay,
Mm.
but you're no longer welcome anymore. Thank you, but no thank you
Mhm.
was my key phrase during those whole few months of heartbreak
Mm.
for my feelings that would come like, thank you for showing up, all the defense mechanisms, all the pain, all
Yeah.
the hurt, but you're not welcome here anymore. Like, and it,
Mm.
it felt so respectful in this like imaginary conversation, but it truly did help me. So I hope I don't sound too
Thank
crazy, and I
you.
hope that does help some people.
No, you don't at all. Anyone that's listening, if this resonates with you a little bit, what you are basically describing is what might help actually is what I'll just say is researching IFS, internal family systems. And it was created by this man called Dick Schwartz. It's a therapy techniques, so you can actually find psychotherapists that are trained in IFS. There's also these really great books, like Susan McConnell wrote a book, Somatic IFS is kind of like she brings somatics into IFS. IFS is very
Mm,
up here in the brain, I would say, obviously just like psychotherapy. And
mhm,
then she brings in a more somatic approach to IFS. So those are some, and I'll try to link them below in the description so you can just click on them and read some more. And I'll link some podcasts that I really love. Um, but yes, that's what you're describing. So the anger would be a firefighter. That in like IFS terms, and you're completely right. The firefighters, the anger, frustration, maybe these negative coping mechanisms that we use, like alcohol, drugs,
mhm,
overworking, sex, whatever. Those are typically firefighters. And then beneath that, the firefighters are there because they're protecting the vulnerable part of sadness, of grief, of not feeling enough, of whatever, whatever is beneath that. And we need all of our parts, and all of our parts are there for a reason. So the way that
mhm,
you're saying, like, thank you, and acknowledging that they're there, that's all that they want. They just these
mhm.
parts of us just want to be acknowledged and to be seen. So to be able
Mhm.
to bring that firefighter part to life, and then compassionately, once again, you're going to hear us say
Yeah.
that all the time, compassionately ask them, like, can you step back a little bit? What, or even if they can't, like, what would it look like? Can we just explore this thought of what would it look like if you didn't feel like you had to hold on so tightly and express all of this anger all the time?
Yeah.
And then bringing the somatic side into it, sometimes you need to express that fucking anger. Like maybe that,
Mhm.
like, or draw it, like you're saying,
Yes.
like sometimes we need to physically express our anger, like go safely, please. Like go
Yeah.
for a run is how I express
Mhm.
anger a lot of times, but go like punch a pillow or scream or yell. That's where
Mhm.
breath work comes in, is allowing these parts to be expressed in a somatic breathwork session, to allow yourself to have that like vocalization of a yell or hitting
Mhm.
pillows or whatever. But then once we express it and acknowledge it and see it and pull it up, then we get to see what's underneath and what these firefighter parts are protecting, and what
Yeah.
these protector parts are protecting. Um, and then acknowledging, like, this is you, like internal family systems. Like, I love that name because it's the family within you. It's not
Yeah.
familial relationships. It's all of these parts make up you, and they're like a
Mhm.
family. And family
Yeah.
dynamics are sometimes tough, and we struggle
Yeah.
with them, and we have fights and grief and sad conversations. But no, you don't sound crazy at all. I'm
Yeah.
into all of that, and there's so much healing that happens there when we're able to pick up these parts. Like, what you're doing is you're localizing your parts, and you're pulling
Mhm.
them out, and you're pulling out the anger, you're pulling out the sadness. To close, what I want to ask you is, you just gave such a beautiful tangible example of one way that you tap into your frustration is through art. And I have done that
Mhm.
as well. I'm curious if you have any other, for people that really resonate with the finding resistance. And sometimes
Mhm.
Sometimes the answer is not to talk about it. For me, like,
Right.
sometimes we need to talk about it, sometimes we need to express in other ways, sometimes we
Mhm.
need people, sometimes we need to do it by ourselves. So,
Mhm.
what other tools do you have, if any, that you have found personally really resonated with you?
Yeah. Oh, I love this because I think we talked about it on my podcast, but I'm a yoga instructor, so
Yeah.
people think I'm like the very
Oh.
peaceful, which I am sometimes, but like the fiery energy is so readily available for me at any given moment. So for me, I do need to get out the frustration and
Mm,
grief, especially, it has to start in the body, at least for me. So what I mentioned before is the anger journal. So I
mhm.
had one journal that was probably just full of like not gonna say it because we'll get censored, but just full cursing and just F this person and F you for this. And
Mhm.
just like it was the sloppiest handwriting of my life, but just scribbling on the paper, like, I'm so angry and I can't go just yell in your face. And I
Mm.
don't want to say this to someone else because that's a full projection, but I
Right.
need to put it somewhere out of my body. So I did that a lot, and that really changed my life. Sometimes I would rip it up, or just even leave it in the notebook. But kickboxing for me was really helpful for a bit because
Mm.
I love working out, but for me, the action of like getting it onto something else. I think maybe as people, we're natural projectors. We just like put
Mhm.
it out. And I've learned that I don't want to project onto people that have nothing to do with my anger. So
Mhm.
putting it onto something that is an inanimate object
Yeah.
helped me transform it because saying things in my head or I'm feeling certain things and I want to scream out, ah. And it also includes your breath so much in
Mm.
like a kickboxing class because you're hitting something and you have to breathe and you got to fight your way through. And it,
Mm.
in a way, it builds self confidence and self trust as well.
Yeah.
Because it's motivating to say, I am going to get through this. I'm really mad and I'm going to push through and I got
Mhm.
this. And you're showing yourself that support. So doing things
Mm.
that aren't too challenging that you're going to then feel bad about yourself for, but something that
Mhm.
you know you can push yourself through, and it's gonna bump up your confidence even a little bit, and you're gonna feel
Yeah.
stronger. And then as a yoga instructor, I do know the poses that help. So I'll
Mm.
just name a few. A lot of feelings are in the hips, a lot of like trauma emotions, and I have been in classes before where people are just break down crying in a pigeon pose and
Yeah.
that's very normal. It's super
Mhm.
normal. So I would say doing a lot of hip work and
Mhm.
getting it out. Frog pose is great because again, it forces your breath to be there. It forces you to be in an uncomfortable physical situation, but then
Mm.
your mind and your breath and like your spirit, they come and they join you and they help you
Mm.
transform the energy.
Mm.
It it's such a mind, body, soul experience where those different parts of you join together to help you release what
Mhm.
you're holding on to. So that's something that I found so helpful, especially for myself, even now, if I'm feeling stuck energy. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, it's in the hips. I have to do something with my hips, and it's
Yeah.
usually pigeon, frog pose for sure, cow legs really gets it going. And lastly, I'll say shaking because that's my thing of the month,
Yeah.
but shaking has improved my mood after I do it. Like even if I'm
Nice.
angry doing it, I'll be huffing and puffing and angry and
Mhm.
pissed off. And then after I'm like, okay, maybe I was maybe I was just like a little over dramatic, or maybe
Yeah.
that feeling just needed to pass and I'm not actually
Yeah.
gonna be in a bad mood the whole day.
Yep.
Like maybe it just need to be like shook out a little bit. So
Yeah.
shaking and just bopping around and moving your body in a way where you lose control. You're not
Mhm.
controlling it, you're not keeping it in that box. You're
Yeah.
just moving until you feel ready to slow down and then you come back and your body's tingly and you
Mhm.
might feel some weird sensations in your belly and your legs and your arms
Mhm.
and then you get to ground back to yourself. And
Mm.
that part is so important because you're slowing down, you built up all the energy and you shook it all out and now you're coming back to the energy. You're not just throwing it out, but you're really transforming it. You're shaking it out and then rechecking in with yourself. So those are some
Yeah.
tools that I've I've used.
I love that. Thank you. And you're right. Like a lot of times these emotions just need to be felt and then they are done. Like we don't
Yeah,
always we can hold on to stories for a long time. Emotions being felt in the body does not
yeah,
need to be does not need to be held in the body for a long period of time. So when we allow ourselves through expression, through moving, like moving our bodies moves energy. Using our
Yes.
voice moves energy. Those are the two biggest ways that I know. So yes,
Mhm.
shaking, getting yourself in a yoga pose, using your voice. Like if you're really angry, allowing yourself to yell and get it out.
Mhm.
Allowing like the vocalization to just come up and out. Sound moves energy. So a big part of my business is somatic breath work, you know that, and a big part of my intro is allowing that breath to incorporating the vocalization with the breath on the exhale, and then
Yeah.
allowing that energy to be moved. I mean, there's and you don't need hours to do it. You
Mhm.
can do it
Yeah.
in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and just allowing it to move through, and then yeah, and then you're like, oh, maybe today's not that bad of a day. Maybe I'm not
Yeah.
that frustrated,
Yeah.
like, you had to let that move, and then once it
Yeah.
moves, then the story also can be resolved around whatever that frustration, or a little bit, a little, there
Yeah.
can be some resolve there. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those tips. I hope that they were
Of
helpful.
course.
I said this, we close. This is still the beginning of the podcast. So for those listeners that maybe this is the first podcast episode you clicked on, we always close every podcast episode with a little human design insight. Human design has been a tool in my toolbox that has created such opportunity and invitation to come out of my box. Like you were saying in the beginning, it's a tool that it's based in astrology. So if you can just Google human design. It's just like a birth chart. You need your birth location, birth time, and this is like who you are at your core. So, like I said in the beginning, Gabby is a 4-1 emotional authority manifesting generator. I'm also a manifesting generator. I share a lot about your energy types. So we have 5 energy types, you being a manifesting generator. So today I want to share a little bit about the emotional authority, which is diving a little bit deeper into human design. So um, for those of you that are just starting out, I recommend just starting with the energy types, and then you can get into the smaller nuances like your authority, like your profile lines. But you being an emotional authority is so interesting to me because I don't know like the exact number, but I haven't personally met a lot of manifesting generators that are emotional authorities. So
Mm.
one of the most interesting things that I have learned about emotional authorities, and my niece is an emotional authority, so manifesting generator. So I had this conversation with my sister, but one of the most fun things that I learned is emotional authorities. Your authority is basically how you make your best decisions. So how when you're trying to navigate, is this aligned, is this not aligned, should I do this, should I not do this, and this can be very simple. It could be, what do I want to eat for dinner? It can be,
Mhm.
what do I want my career to be, where do I want to move? Like, we don't have to be huge big topics here, but my fun fact about emotional authorities is you do very well checking in with yourself over multiple check-ins. So like I'm a
Mhm.
sacral authority, and my responses are typically very strong, very fast. Yes, no's. And it's like
Mhm.
shows up in my sacral center in my body. Emotional authorities, it's still going to show up in your body. So doing a little body scan, like, does this feel good for me? But the question to ask yourself is like, do I feel lighter? Do I feel lighter when
Mm.
I'm navigating this situation? So like, um, I don't know, let's use the silly example of what to eat for dinner. Like, does thinking about eating pasta for dinner make me feel lighter? Does it make me feel good? Or does thinking about eating tacos for dinner make me feel lighter or make me feel good? And
Mm.
then checking in with yourself at least like 4 or 5 more times depending on, I mean, maybe not food, but like for
Yeah, yeah.
for bigger situations, checking in with yourself, different times of the day, different situations, maybe paying attention to how you feel when you're talking about your options with other people.
Mm,
Um, and really checking in with, what does that feel like in my body? Does it feel light? Does it feel heavy or dense? And then
mm,
your yes is the levity. Um, and then the second part of that would be emotional authorities. Because emotions are so dense, we've already walked through all
mm.
of that today. We've talked a lot about that. You're very rarely going to have that like full body yes, full body no. So like a sacral authority would have, or even the splenic authorities, like we would have more of a full body yes, full body no. For an emotional authority, it's like 80%. Like, do I 80% feel like this is the
Yeah.
right decision for me? After I've explored it, after I've dove into how it feels in my body for a while,
Mhm.
you're probably not going to have that like, for sure, this is
Yeah,
it, this is the, like, I'm sold. And knowing that there's a lot of freedom in that, because a lot of times
yeah.
when we talk about human design, we're talking about like splenic and sacral authorities, and it's always like yes, 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 you get a full body
Mhm.
yes, full body no. Emotional authorities, you have that little bit of like, is this still right for me? I don't know, but I think I mostly know
Yeah.
that it feels right.
That
Awesome.
is pretty crazy because I don't know much about human design, but after this, I'm
Mhm.
so interested because I I always said I'm indecisive because I'm a Libra and it just, like, fits the
Yeah.
box,
Yep.
but I see that in myself because even deciding to move to Italy, we were back and forth with a few options, and this was only, like, a few months before we decided what we were gonna do, and I
Mhm.
was like, "Sardinia does feel good in my body, though, like, coming here feels good," but I am the type that will be like, mostly, like, for the most part, like,
Yep.
there's gonna be a little part that has the, like, "But I wonder," but
Yep.
we'll see. I am definitely I agree with everything you said, which is pretty
Yeah.
crazy because I wasn't sure where we were going with it, but you went you brought it straight home. Wow.
Good. Yeah, and there's
Wow.
a lot of freedom in that, I think, because you know, my niece is only 11, so I had this conversation with my sister, but there's a lot, like, she can never, yeah, like, the indecisiveness, and a lot of
Yeah.
times I think that when we're indecisive about something, we feel like it might be the wrong decision.
Mhm.
So that's why I love learning about that if you're an emotional authority, or I love teaching about that because 'cause I'm not, obviously,
Mhm.
but, um, you have that nuance, and so it's okay. Like, it's okay if
Yeah.
I'm 80% sure, if I'm 80% like there,
Yeah.
that is your 100% more than
Mhm.
likely.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah,
interesting. I do
so
that
fun.
for the small things like food. I will think about
Yeah.
what I'm gonna eat, and I will go back and forth like 10 times, then I'm like, "Okay, no, just you have to decide, just pick this." And then
Yeah.
I'll be making it, and I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm gonna make the other thing," and then I'll stop making it. We're gonna jump ship.
Yeah,
Such
sometimes we
a
need
really
that.
interesting.
Sometimes you need to be in the situation to then know, but I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
All right, so
Thank you
where
for
can
sharing
people.
it.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. I hope this is helpful for,
Yeah?
and like I said, if you're new on your human design journey, I like the My Human Design app. That's a super easy one, but you can find so much information on human design, and listen to the end of every podcast episode and you'll get little
Yeah?
little nuggets. Where can people find you? Where do you hang out the most? And if people want to
Mm.
follow up or just hang out with you, where do you hang out?
Yeah. Instagram is mostly where I'm at. It's just Guidance with Gab. I'm on Facebook. I don't even know if it's under like my name or Guidance with Gab. Not really sure, but I am on there sometimes. But mostly Instagram. I'm on YouTube as well, where I post my yoga videos and
Okay.
also my podcast, which is Guidance with Gab. Um, And then also on Spotify as well, you could check out my podcast, but yeah, mostly Instagram is where you'll find me. And I love getting messages from people, so like I said, I love connecting, so don't be scared, I don't bite
I love that.
unless I'm
Thank
frustrated.
you. Yeah, if you hit me on a good day.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, all of that information is also going to be down in this description if you want to follow up. But thank you so much for this conversation. There's so many avenues that we walked down, but I absolutely loved having it. Thank you for finally bringing this fruition, this dream of conversation to fruition for me. I
Mm,
think it's going to be the first of many because
yeah.
there's so much layers here. There's so many layers here, but this was so
Yeah.
lovely and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.